Hello there, and welcome to our first extra episode here at CUZZO-OP. So, you may be wondering, what is an extra episode? Essentially, what an extra episode is going to be is a bonus episode containing extra cut content from our main episodes, which we usually release on Friday nights. Sometimes during the editing process, we come to realize that there are conversations that mess with the flow of the episode or make the episode a little bit too longer than it needs to be, and we feel like we need to cut the content in order to make things better. However, it does hurt us that some conversations don't ever get to see the light of day. So what we thought of was, what if we release episodes on Tuesdays occasionally when we feel like we have something that we really just want to put out there? And now we have extras. So for our first extra episode, you'll be listening to cut content from our 101 Getting Into Star Wars episode, where we talk about the sequel trilogy and end up having a little bit of a back and forth with one another, which only showcases why the trilogy can become so divisive within the Star Wars fandom. Enjoy. Let's jump to where we're going to find controversy with the sequel trilogy. You know, and the reason why this feels controversial, and I'm going to take over here, is like, number one, Lucas sells to Disney. So you're losing the founder, the one who created this whole thing. So people are already going to believe you don't have what it takes. MCU's popping off, and they're seeing the way Disney makes movies. Up to 2015, you've had almost 2 whole phases of Marvel complete. And people are like, yo, can you make Star Wars, right? And Force Awakens is not the first thing that Disney releases under their Star Wars management. It's the second one, but it's the first movie. And so you look at the Force Awakens and you see what the Force Awakens has. And then you look at The Last Jedi, they released that 2 years later. And you start to get this feeling like, there's a connectivity here that I felt in 2 other trilogies that I'm not feeling anymore. And then episode 9 releases and you're like, okay, this feels different. Even the hardest Star Wars fan, the most hardcore Star Wars fan, something different here. This is different than the other 2 trilogies. You like it, dislike it, but it's different because the connectivity feels lost in some areas. And it also felt like they didn't know what to do. And so let's talk about the controversy of the sequel trilogy, but why it was also important for these movies to exist, because there is importance here also. So either one of you wish to take that on, because I know that I from my understanding, there's 3 different sides to this conversation sitting right here in this podcast.
And I know one of these sides is convinced on the argument, yo. Like, you can't tell this particular side. You can't tell this particular side, Arrow, that there's holes in his logic concerning these sequels. You know what I'm saying? You can't tell him. You can't tell him.
So first things first,
I'm gonna hit round 1.
I'm gonna hit the magic first, because no matter how you see it, these movies look very stunning.
Oh yeah.
These are beautiful films.
Oh yeah.
The music is still banging.
Last Jedi top tier.
And it's just, they're beautiful movies. Like, individually, you might be able to find some movie making magic, but is it fully Star Wars movie making magic is the question for some people. Maybe. But the controversy of this trilogy, it's unfortunately the heaviest conversation. And so for me, as a Star Wars lover who watches all of these with love, no matter my anger or upsetness with how it was handled, this movie trilogy is a mess because of a lack of continuity, a lack of direction from all creatives behind the wheel, and a lack of understanding of how to work well with one another. And that's just facts. No matter who you look to as your favorites and not favorites, the people behind this trilogy They number one, there's an apprentice, Dave Filoni, that wasn't really heavily involved in these projects the way he is in other areas. And so they looked to directors to tell what Star Wars looked like to them. Mm-hmm. And it hurt the property. Mm-hmm. It hurt the property because at the end of the day, because Star Wars looks so different to so many people, when you take those people and you say, y'all need to get this whole thing going together, and it's easy to see that they didn't do that.
Yeah, man, I think at the end of the day, look, this is a Hollywood issue. You know what I mean? They said, oh, well, Kathleen Kennedy did so great with Jurassic. And now that we got her over here at Disney and she can run Lucasfilm over here and make this happen for these next sequel trilogy, it's going to be great. It's going to be blockbuster level. You know what's crazy is it was blockbuster level. These are high grossing films. These are legendary performing films. But like you said, the question is it because of everything that came before it or because of everything that it has to bring to the table? And I think, Locke already subbed me. I'll stand firm in that. You might have been rocking with my opinions and effing with my opinions this entire episode. It's been an hour and 4 minutes almost, you know what I mean? Fine. So it's like, that's cool. This might be the part where we just have to go separate ways. And that's fine. But hear ye. The Force Awakens was a successful movie because J.J. Abrams, he literally copied A New Hope.
Yeah.
Top to bottom.
Bible.
I can give you a frame by frame breakdown. You can open up TikTok right now and type in The Force Awakens and A New Hope comparison. And you will watch people like New Media Rockstar, shout out to the gang.
Okay.
Break down how similar this movie is to a T. Themes, pacing, shots, concepts,
conversations.
It's true. Safe. It's an extremely safe movie. And you know what? It made a safe amount of money for it because they knew what to do. Disney catered. It was almost like fan service, but undercover. It was like undercover fan service. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When they give you everything you want and don't dare to push it. But this is what I got to say about the rest. All right. I live in Texas and I have a tree in the backyard. And when it's hot, and then we hit into the fall, we have these pink leaves that start to grow on the tree. It almost looks like cherry blossoms. And it's a tree that can endure the heat. When it's hot and it's 100+ degrees, the tree is lit. But what's wild is I also live in Texas. So we get tornadoes, we get hurricanes, it's flat land. So as much as it's a beautiful thing, when the storms hit and when it gets wild, there's branches all over my lawn. And now I got to figure out how I'm going to clean them up. It's a mess. It's wild. But you know what's crazy? I would never cut that tree down. Ever. Never. And that's how I feel about The Last Jedi, straight up. I think everybody has a lot of opinions about J.J. Abrams taking a back seat and not being chosen to direct the next film and Rian Johnson jumping in. And a lot of people did not like where he took the film. You will hear me now, just like you heard me on May 4th, 2023. I think what Rian Johnson decided to do with this film was absolutely brilliant. And you want to know why? I think that if we had Dave Filoni involved with this process, we would end up with something more like The Last Jedi than we would end up with something more like The Rise of Skywalker. I would even double down and say we'd have something more like The Last Jedi than something like The Force Awakens, because Dave Filoni is an innovator and a disruptor, and everything we've learned has been built off of and branched off of the initial seeds planted from the prequel onward. So to me, I just feel like The Last Jedi dared to take the legacy to a new space, and I don't necessarily think it was in spite of the legacy. I think it only was able to make certain decisions because of the legacy. And I think Rian Johnson had an understanding of that. I think when we talk about directors, actors, producers that were influenced by Star Wars, I think Rian Johnson is one of those people. And so you watch the interviews, you listen to the conversations, you see what's going on. He dared to kind of push us into a New Testament time out of Old Testament times and play with this concept of old, letting go of the old to accept the new. And what's wild is a lot of the people I see on Threads and on Twitter and on X, whatever the frick you want, on Reddit, that are complaining about what's going on with Disney now driving the Star Wars franchise. This controversy is never going to go anywhere. And it's because old heads are always going to want old things. And they're never going to consider the fact that what's new could take us to places that we've never been to before. And that's my opinion of The Last Jedi. Do I think it was abrupt and it could have been better, and it attached to Rise of Skywalker with J.J. Abrams now being back in the seat because of the amount of people that have backlash about this film? Disney didn't know what to do because Disney got to make money. But at the end of the day, I don't know, man. I really would love to hear George Lucas, R.I.P., like, I would really like to hear like George Lucas, because his opinion, because RIP, because his opinion on what matters with Star Wars, it left the moment he sold this project. RIP the old days. You understand what I'm saying? So
Man,
I really would love to have a conversation with George Lucas. RIP your ability to give an opinion on what's going on with Star Wars because you decided to sell it. And that's the other thing. The people are defending George Lucas's name like George Lucas didn't catch a bag off selling this franchise.
Oh yeah,
that's the other thing that be getting me hot. So I'm
now
looking
he's
at
making
the whole
more
thing.
stuff he really wants to make.
Come on, bro, and he's commissioning his apprentice to do a lot of things.
I was gonna say
he's on set. Dave Filoni invites him to set. He's been on the Mandalorian set, Ahsoka set. He's there.
That's what I was trying to say, bro. I think that's an interesting thing to partake in, though, because we lost George Lucas, but we retained Dave Filoni, who, in a lot of ways, some will say is like the child burst of George Lucas's heart. You know what I'm saying? In terms of
he's a pupil, bro.
Yeah, he's a pupil.
He's
even
a Padawan.
His story of how he got in there, how he got in the mix, like he wasn't even supposed to really be in the mix. He wasn't even top choice to be in the mix.
Again, the idea to play with this concept of Sith, Jedi, right, wrong, trauma, what twists your ability to say what's right and what's wrong. The Last Jedi did a better job at that than any other movie in this trilogy, my opinion. And here we are looking at Ahsoka, looking at all these other things, The Mandalorian, commissioned by Filoni. And I think it's talking a lot more to this daring dynamic, playing with fire a lot more than ever. And so I can't with the people on the internet who say this movie's a piece of shit and that it should have never came out. Me personally, I think you all suck. Me personally, just being honest with you, I'm from the camp where it's like this movie needed to happen because it needed to prove the very theme that exists in the Star Wars universe, which is y'all can't get over the old to accept the new.
Yeah.
Y'all can't get over the fact that life is not black and white. It is not black and white. It's super gray. And the journey led by the Force is a gray journey.
Oh, go ahead.
That's it. That's all I got for y'all. So that's what I think the controversy has to do with. It has to do with human opinion. And it's almost like we came back from space and landed back on Earth with this trilogy for a bit. And it got real tense for a bit those years, man. It was real interesting to talk Star Wars back then.
It definitely was. My stance on this controversy is The Last Jedi should have never been made the way that it was because of the fact that it was a middle movie. That movie is that's not a way to do a middle movie, you know, because to me, you know, and I love Rian Johnson as a director from a lot of the things I've seen him in or, you know, in charge of. And yet, I feel like when you are brought in as the middleman, you don't get to just solely decide that your story to tell is the only story to be told. I think Empire Strikes Back, having a director, along with George Lucas, of course, it's seamless, you know, from one director to another. It's very much the same story continuing from the first movie to the second movie.
But The Force Awakens was too safe, bro.
But there are a lot of open doors that Johnson then decides to answer and close. You can't tell me one thing from The Last Jedi that's left for the next movie to answer.
I'm sorry, but I don't agree with that. Me personally,
there's nothing there.
I think Finn and what Finn's journey could have looked like on the other end of The Last Jedi was still very teed up and folded on. I think Rey's parent and heritage was folded on. I think that shouldn't have been conclusive. It should have been introductory. It should have been this level of like, hey man, you don't have to come from greatness to be great.
But I feel like you can do that and still tell a decent story. And I think that's the issue here, though, is because.
So you think TLJ is not a decent story? Is that
hear me out? Hear me out. I think I can respect TLJ for the things that it gets right and the things that it tries to do in relation to, like, the old temple has been destroyed, but we can build a new temple type vibe. You know, shout out Sverdic. Like I get that aspect. I get that. But that possibility or that theme of you don't have to come from this and you don't have to do this and you don't have to be that to do that is and can be told better. So I'm going to jump for a minute, but if we even go look at the whole Into the Spider-Verse setup, the whole Miles Morales setup, there's things in there that play on the typical Spider-Man story, but then completely take it another way. Right? Even Apple knew I was hitting my stride. You know what I'm saying? You can completely take it another way. You get what I'm saying? Like, you can tell an origin story that is different from all the ones we're accustomed to, right? And still do it in a way that is grounding and that is thoughtful down the line. I feel like Finn's character setup was folded on in the worst way possible. I feel like the danger in The Force Awakens was that it was safe, but it was also dangerous. Because you played it safe and because you went back to the original form, you have to also continue that stride. The reason why 4, 5, and 6 stands the way it does is because from A New Hope all the way to the end of the trilogy, bangers. Story bangers, character development bangers, questions answered, and the directors changed. So for people saying, oh, the director should have never changed, and the arguments would be like, oh, why we got Rian Johnson? Yo, the director's thing is actually a moot point because it was done before. It was done before.
I don't agree with that because the story still came from George Lucas throughout the whole thing. It's coming from one man. And if anybody and if anybody wants to really get mad at anybody about the lack of cohesion, it's funny because the president that bro, like dudes don't want to talk about Kathleen Kennedy. Nobody wants to talk about a consistent individual who was involved with the production process of this whole entire thing from a presidential standpoint.
And she's trash for it.
She greenlit this whole thing. And I don't think she greenlit it purely off of the idea of, man, this is going to make us bread. I don't think it was. I don't. I think
interviews with her, bro. She knows nothing about Star Wars.
I think if you think it's going to make it bread, then you do what J.J. Abrams did and you play it safe. You do what's going to make you bread by playing a story that's safe. You
didn't hear what I just said? Go watch the interviews of Kathleen Kennedy, bro. She's making a bread move. That's why they came out trash.
Okay, right. but time out. Her job is to make the bread moves because she's not the creative head of Lucasfilm.
Sure.
Her job is to make the decisions that will make Lucasfilms money.
Yes, sure. But when you make those decisions, you impact what happens to the movie in some way, shape, or form.
But did Last Jedi make as much money as The Force Awakens is the question.
You better be asking that question with the answer known.
Force Awakens made a lot more money than The Last Jedi. The way it went was The Force Awakens and then The Last Jedi and then The Rise of Skywalker.
Do you see why?
It was a declination that was happening within the process of these films coming out, which is why so many people, this is also part of answering your question. Why is there so much controversy about the sequel trilogy? It's because they lost the wheel.
Right.
That was consistent.
There were too many hands on the wheel.
But I just want to say this, and then I'm going to let you have it. I'm going to shut up after this. If Rian Johnson decided to veer left in The Force Awakens, if he had gotten selected as the director, we'd still have this conversation and people still would have hated it because the difference would have been enough whether it happened earlier or it happened in the middle of the story or it happened in the end of the story. Everyone was going to be upset about the difference no matter what, because majority of the complaints about this trilogy have to do with, oh, you did Luke Skywalker so slime. He deserved so much more. Hey, bro, have you ever considered the fact that Luke Skywalker's humble conclusion on the other end of being the chosen one and the great one, just like his dad, is a similar legacy to Anakin Skywalker, in the sense that what we mark as success or greatness had to be redefined and understood by this character? Have we thought about the fact that a lot of maturity was introduced by The Last Jedi in the way it delivered its concepts? And that maturity is in the stitching of why we say Star Wars is so special, why we say Anakin fighting Ahsoka, and Ahsoka, as we talk about that series in a couple minutes here, is so special. It's because it's grown man shit. And I feel like The Force Awakens was still very kiddie. It was still very rudimentary. It was still very elementary because it was safe, like we've said, all of us have said. So I just feel like at any point where you don't play it safe and you decide, I'm going to take this legacy that's built 30 years ahead of myself and decide to take it to a new space, there was always going to be haters. There's always going to be haters. But it's going to happen no matter what.
I think there's just an element that's being missed, though. So like zoom out from the thematic element of just Luke Skywalker's character and his disappearance, moving away from that and moving away from the idea of like, okay, we don't have to be this or come from this way to be a Jedi, or we don't have to do this to come. That's fine. Again, I'm not denoting the value. What I'm getting at is the execution and how that execution has hampered what you can see in it. You get what I'm trying to say? Like,
but what was bad about the execution is what I'm trying to understand. Like,
bro.
So to hop back to the point that started this for me is that if you're driving and you go at a crossroads to hit a left turn and the person in the passenger seat grabs the wheel and turns that shit right, what's going to happen? You're not going to go right away. Your car's going to skirt and flip because of the drastic change that you decided to make halfway through your decision-making process. So when Rian Johnson pulls through and he decides the villain y'all are setting up to be the new Palpatine, I'm going to murk him in the second movie. I'm going to answer who Rey's parents are. I'm going to change who Luke Skywalker is. I'm going to do all of these things in the same film. And what am I going to leave you for Rise of Skywalker? You got to figure all that out on yourself, because I'm not going to be here. Like, that's my problem. As a second movie, as a sequel, you talk about how sequels make the first movie better. This didn't do that to me. Force Awakens, when we were talking magic this whole time, feels like the most Star Wars movie. It feels more magical than The Last Jedi.
Because it's safe. Because it's a carbon copy of a movie that's already made.
But it's not, because I'm also going to make the point that we've just watched everybody say that Dune 2 is a carbon copy of Dune 1 and 2 is A New Hope. Because when you break things down to a simple nature, they're the same thing.
Wait.
This is why I can't stand the internet, because you said everybody's saying that. Well, everybody needs to go jump off a cliff, because that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, but everybody's doing it because at the end of the day, when you look at the things simply, you can do that with anything you want to do. But no one's taking into the consideration that characters like Han Solo, they want to say he's the new Obi-Wan of this trilogy. Well, there's something different here, because when we look at him...
They said that?
Well, when you're comparing it to A New Hope, he's the old wise mentor coming in to help the new generation. That's what I'm saying. If you go watch New Rockstar's video, that's what he's going to sit here and say. He's the mentor. But what about him as a character? He's different than the original A New Hope, because who the fuck is Obi-Wan Kenobi in the original movie? He's just the old dude, but this is Han Solo. So now you're thinking about his development and his tie to these characters and how he's progressed as a character. You're looking at the differences between Vader and Kylo, and how Kylo isn't the way Vader was because he's just a masked villain wearing all black, is what new rock stars will tell you. But what about the untapped rage that he seems to have, and the push and pull concept that he displays in that first movie anyway? Way more human than Vader ever had in that first Star Wars movie. Because his humanity wasn't tapped in.
Now, one thing I'll say though,
Empire.
Kylo Ren, I feel like Kylo Ren's story throughout those 3 movies somehow, some way was able to kind of like pseudo be salvaged. Like I feel like I in Rise of Skywalker, like I kind of liked him. I'm not gonna hold you. They're gonna kill me in the comments. I get it, but and
listen, because at this point, I don't know what in this conversation is and isn't making it into the actual episode.
But I think, whether you decide to keep this in the conversation or not, listen, 101, getting into Star Wars, this is where a lot of like we said in the beginning of this point, the controversy lies. This is where an explosion happened. This is where Phase 4 of Marvel began, and everyone started saying Disney Plus was the worst thing that ever happened to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You know what I mean? Like, this is where it started. This is where this universe that was being built pretty perfectly, if I'm honest, like basically like 9 out of 10, knocking it out of the park. These 3 movies dropped, and then that's when the conversation started to be like, hey, are they headed in a good way? Or are they not? And every TV show that's come from this point has fleshed out ideas that come from, again, the foundation of the prequel trilogy, the honors the original trilogy and what it introduced in terms of the bad and the good, and then the sequel trilogy poked holes in that concept. And so it's like, it's either your brother and sibling to that, or you're against that concept, and that's what it's introduced. And that's why, for me, everything I love about Rebels is everything I love about Last Jedi. Everything I love about The Last Jedi is everything I love about Ahsoka. Everything I love about Ahsoka is everything I love about Bad Batch. Like, it's just, that's the camp I come from. So you, as the first time maybe listening to idea of Star Wars lore, if you're looking for a place to jump in, maybe you start here. Who knows? Maybe you start here. Maybe you start at Force Awakens and go backwards and figure it all out. The whole point is that this universe has a lot of nuances to it, and you could jump in anywhere and experience the ride. So I don't necessarily think it's for nothing. You get passionate perspectives that do exist amidst the Star Wars community.
Creative cohesiveness was lost during this trilogy because there were too many hands on the wheel and no planning. There was no planning involved. George Lucas didn't plan the original trilogy, but he was there to continue the thoughts and talk about what he was creating. And that wasn't the case here. They let too many people try and hold that steering wheel and drive a trilogy together when that's not how it works. Why? Because Star Wars is something different to everyone.
I think it's a hard task though. Like I will say, I do believe, like to Isaiah's argument, I do believe that there is an element in stories like Star Wars that are owed a level of what happens when we, because even when you look, and I'm not trying to get biblical with it, but even when you look at one of the greatest stories ever told, like there are elements of death and rebirth. The whole underlying thing is death and rebirth. And I think hold on. But like my point is that I believe death and rebirth can be executed in a way that doesn't give the feel that Willie is harping on. I don't think we disagree about what it does well. I think I more so disagree with about how it delivers the package. I feel like the packaging delivery there was parts to it where it was good. And I was like, okay, I see where y'all could go with this. I see where this could be. Okay, so we doing this. Oh, we completely getting rid of that. Okay, Luke's character is taking a turn. Okay, but there's a way that you do it that pays out in a way that is rewarding to the audience. And I feel like one thing that Star Wars, for the most part, again, with its flaws, one thing that Star Wars does a good job of, even the series and the spin-offs and everything, is that there's an element of development and reward for that development. And I just feel like that was muddied. Not that the route that they were going wasn't a good route to go. You want to change it, shake it up? Cool. That's not my issue. You want to do Death and Rebirth and shake it up and be like, nah, we don't got to come from this at all. Flip the script on these dummies. You know what I'm saying? Wow.
So when would have been the best? Like, I guess we could talk. This is when I'll let the host take over. My bad, Arrow. Do your thing. Let's talk about when is the best time to change the story, to poke holes in the story. And I think TV does that best.
When is the
to
best
prop
time?
up and poke holes at the same time.
Yeah, and I think we did that with I think we saw a good idea, like a good execution of that with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because you used to be a big Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. person, but that was poking a lot of holes in the stuff that we knew Marvel-wise. And so, yes, I do believe like TV shows are a good place to do that. And I feel like some of the best Star Wars stuff I've seen has been executed TV.
I understand, man. I just think that if the Rise of Skywalker wasn't a veer back to the right direction instead of the left that everyone's saying that Rian Johnson abruptly took us into, we'd also have a different opinion on this. But money is what led them to make the right turn again, because everyone was upset about it.
Disney's choice and Disney's whole thing all the time, no matter what they're doing, is if one thing didn't work, you have the 180. You don't 90 degree, you don't 75 degree, you hit the 180.
Which is trash.
You know?
Yeah,
and
tragic.
It is terrible. It's a terrible decision because that's just whiplash left and right. Whiplash left and right, you know? You don't change the story midway through. And then when the midway through point changing doesn't work, you don't try to go back. You roll with the punches. And that's what you got to do. Sometimes you got to roll with the punches. And, you know, the funny thing is we've seen the drafts of a film that honored what The Last Jedi had thrown out there.
That's true.
We've seen what would have been called the Duel of Fates looked like. And they decided that that's not where they wanted to go. You know, would we be having a different conversation if the Duel of Fates released instead of The Rise of Skywalker? Probably. Because based on what those drafts, for me, that was a better movie than Rise of Skywalker. But I think it all does stem from the fact that Last Jedi decided that it was going to take its stance and do something different where it did. I'm always down for that. And that is all for our first extra episode. We hope you enjoyed listening to it, or maybe you didn't enjoy it, depending on what side of the fandom you fall on. We look forward to seeing what other extra episodes may happen throughout the course of CUZZO-OP. And of course, we are really excited to have you come back this Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for more CUZZO-OP conversations. Until then, take care.